Well, thanks for joining us today. I have Dave the Mystic with us, which is one of our full-time practitioners at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts. And I wanted to take an opportunity to be able to talk to him and ask him questions and him share what he does at the center and his offerings and his story for our community to be able to connect with. So thanks, Dave, for coming. You're my second interview today. I'm getting better and better at this. You know how that goes. Learning all this new technology that we're all getting used to. I've already heard people go, I'm really tired of Zoom. I'm tired of spending all day on Zoom, but Zoom has helped us connect. So I'm very grateful to be able to have tools and technology. I can't even imagine what we would be doing today in 1970 if this happened. We would be a little nutty crazy, I think. So I'm very thankful for all the technology. So Dave, talk to us a little bit about your story. I mean, I know that you were an engineer, and how does an engineer become spiritual, find their way down this path? So share with us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I started out as a kid. I got very interested in electronics and how circuits worked when I was in 5th grade. And I just had to know. That became a driving force for me, that I had to know how circuits worked. Why do you use resistors and transistors and tubes like you do? And I became a ham radio operator in junior high, and I was building radio kits from some of the mail order places in 6th grade and 7th grade. So it just continued on. So real driving need. And I ended up getting my bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering. And my focus ended up being in bioelectrical sciences. How does anatomy and physiology interact with engineering definitions? Very different than how life sciences typically would view the body and things like that. Well, I ended up working at General Motors for a couple years after I got out of college in Michigan. At their proving grounds, I designed test instruments. And then I got tired of Michigan and General Motors and moved to Wichita, where I grew up, and went to work for Boeing for a couple of years. That's where I started my aerospace. And Boeing started downsizing there, and they started talking about moving me to Huntsville, Alabama, and that just wasn't in the cards for Dave. And Martin Marietta from Denver came through interviewing, and I ended up hiring on with Martin Marietta in 1981, and worked in rockets, satellites, black boxes, all kinds of things. I got into a very intense job on analysis, on analyzing circuits, starting on the MX missile program. And my analytical mind, I just started running into conflicts where what I was finding, engineering equations make life easier for engineers to define what's going to happen. It's kind of the view that, well, it's good enough. But as good as these formulas are, for example, Ohm's law, which is a relationship that volts equals ohms times amps, a very fundamental relationship. Ohm's law doesn't tell you anything about what an electron is. It doesn't tell you anything about the fundamental nature of matter. And I started running into a lot of the things that were taught to me as facts in engineering school weren't necessarily so. They were simplifying assumptions that made it easier for us to do our jobs, but they didn't really reflect reality. It's kind of strange to say that, but they're models. And I find this with a lot of engineers. They confuse a math model with the reality of the situation, and it's not necessarily true. So against that backdrop, in 1983, I returned to Wichita for my 10th high school reunion, and I ran into an old friend, and he asked, he said, "Did you become an electrical engineer like you expected?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, Dave, do you think it's possible to change things at a distance?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" Well, he kept beating around the bush. He wouldn't tell me. And he finally said, "Look, come over to my house after the picnic, and I want to show you some things." And we went to his house, and he started showing me phenomena where he could change electrical or electronic things with his mind, and he could do it every time. He uh, he had me walk up to the electric meter on his house. He said, "Do you have an idea of the rate of the wheel?" And I said, "Sure." And he pointed at it kind of like this, and he said, "Now," and it slowed by a third. And he told me, I did this to my mother's house several months ago, and her bills are still lower. We went inside. He had a little black and white TV on rabbit ears, and he put it on a snow channel. You know, Wichita only has 4 transmitted channels. He puts it on a snow channel. No channel is there, and he points at the TV and he causes it to tune in a channel. Suddenly, there's a picture on the TV. Um, we went over to his stereo. He was an FM station disc jockey at the time, and he had a very nice stereo, and it had the volume, the VU meters on the sides for the left and right volume. And he said, "Do you have an idea of how the needles are moving with the music?" Well, sure. I mean, the music gets louder on the left, the needle on the left side goes up, that type of thing. He points at his stereo and goes, "Now," and the needles go out of phase with the music. Suddenly, when the music is loud, the needle goes down instead of up. So he reversed the polarity on that. Uh, then he wanted to show me something in his car. So we go out, we sit in his car, and his car is idling. And this was a conventional ignition. Keep in mind, this was a car that was probably out of the 70s. And he kind of points at the dash and says, "Now," and the idle slows down to where the car is stalling. And he said, "I can stall other cars in traffic too." And it's like, wow, this is getting even more exciting and interesting here. And then we went to his FM radio station. It was a 50,000 watt station. And, based on my knowledge of transmitters at that time, it probably took 100,000 watts into that station for power to get 50,000 watts out of the antenna. And they had a percentage output power meter that was digital. It was reading 99.6. So basically, it was saying 99.6% of 50,000 watts is going out the antenna right now. And it was very stable. It wasn't wavering. And he said, "I can lower the output power in the station." He said, I can't do it too much or I'll trip it off the air. And I've done that before because it thinks there's a failure. But he said, "Watch the meter." He said, "Do you have an idea of the meter?" I said, "Yeah, it's solid, 99.6. Points at the panel board and says, "Now," and immediately drops to 99.2. Well, 0.4% of 50,000 watts is a heck of a lot of power to control with your mind on command at that very instant. It wasn't, well, I tried this 10 times and it happens 3 out of 10. No, every time that we've ever tried an experiment with his power since then, something always happens. It doesn't always go in the direction you expect, but most of the time it does. But it always happens. But all of this experience forced me to return to Denver and say, "Okay, I just had a wake-up call. The big hands came down from the sky, said, 'Dave, you're an electrical engineer. We're going to give you some demonstrations that you can't explain with standard engineering, just for you.'" And that led me to get into, um, I got into some meditation classes, which really didn't jive with me too well. I wasn't ready for the guys in the orange robes. But I did take psychic development classes. I took therapeutic touch energy healing classes, the whole sequence. And I had a very gifted teacher who um, she brought in test cases for us to see how well we did. And again, being an engineer, I really enjoyed the validation. We had one woman come in, and she was maybe in her 50s and a little stout, and our instructor said, "She has a diagnosed health problem. I want you to figure out what it is through energy scanning." When she was first walking in the door, I immediately knew it was abdominal. And then when I was scanning her, I got the colon. And not only that, I got the transverse colon. It just, boom, it just came through to me. And when they went around the circle and said, "What'd you get?" and I told that, then they said, "Okay, this woman has a diagnosed bowel condition. It's in her transverse colon. Today, we'd probably call it IBS or Crohn's. Back then, they had other diagnoses for it. But that type of thing really built my confidence that this stuff is valid. I also got involved with an organization called the Tibetan Foundation, which was teaching how to channel ascended masters. And I thought, well, what the heck? And I got involved with that and even took one of their seminar weekends on how to channel. And well, I'm still a practicing engineer at the time, and I will be for many years. And so I couldn't exactly hang out a shingle anywhere that said Dave Barnett, Martin Marietta, aerospace engineer and energy healer. So it was family and friends for a number of years, but I continued to get readings, and then readings towards the end of 1998, 1999, shortly before I left Lockheed in 2000. They were really pushing me to move forward. And I had the opportunity. I left Lockheed and went to a small renewable energy company for 3 years. And again, I was getting pushed in readings while I was there. And so um, I ended up winning some Air Force R&D contracts in 2003 with a company in California. And I left the company I was working at because a voice came down in my head and said, you have all the time you need, all the money you need, go learn everything you can about healing. And so I went through a major development cycle, self-guided, of meditation, but also learning about 8 or 9 different types of healing modalities. I had 2 years of psychic mentorship classes with the Denver Medium, and I even went to um, acupuncture school for 2 terms. And uh, it wasn't for me, but it was a good grounding in Chinese medicine. And while I was doing all this, other gifts started to really come in. The gift of getting downloads on people's past lives to see how they connect and influence their present life, that really started coming in. Another strange one, which ended up being helpful later on, was I was taken in a meditation. I showed up, the setting where they had me was a courtyard in a castle, and there was a trap door in it. And we went down the trap door. I was with several spiritual beings. We went down a corridor and hit a heavy oak door at the end, pushed it open, and there was somebody being tortured. And I looked at the spiritual guides and I said, okay, what am I supposed to understand out of this? And they said, well, there's no such thing as an objective hell. If you die believing in hell and have an image of what hell is like, and if you think you belong there, the universe says yes, and you will be in a self-created hell. And they said, we want you to figure out a protocol to get these people out of here and get them back to the spiritual plane. So I just got creative. I stood the person up, cleaned them off, hosed them down, put them in a fresh robe, walked them in through a doorway into the adjacent room where there was it's like a conference room, and had them sit down and gave them a glass of water. We explained that they were in an illusionary hell, and to prove it, we had them stand up again, take a torch off the wall, go over and open the door and look out, and now it was a void space. There was nothing there. That whole scenario was gone. That was very convincing to these people, and so we would escort them back to the spiritual plane, reunite them with family and friends, help them reconcile with any perceived enemies, and then they could move on in the spiritual plane. This came out to be very helpful later on because several years later, I had a phone call on a vacation in Las Vegas where a lady said, I'm a friend of your daughter's, and I have something going on in my house that is really freaking me out, and I can't talk to my husband about it. And I said, okay, tell me more. And she said, well, we found out why we got a bargain on this house after we moved in. The previous owner was an older man, and he was a recluse, and he hanged himself in the basement. But nobody would tell us that before we bought the house or why we were getting such a good deal. So, shame on them. But so what was happening was this guy is still walking around the house, and he'd walk up behind her in spirit form and say her name behind her head. And when she'd be laying in bed, he'd come over and press on the covers. And she had 2 little children with her second husband, and like 3 and 5, and they were seeing witches flying out of closets. And so I said, sure, I'll tackle this. What the heck? And I'm in Las Vegas. I don't have any resource material, so I'm just going to meditate and wing it. And everything went quiet and nice. And then about 2 weeks later, she called me again and said, some of it's back. And that's where this other experience of retrieving people from hell helped, because I suddenly had this flash or an insight that this guy who's doing this is in a self-created hell. And I went down and found him. And so we repatriated him back to the spiritual plane. He had guilt about committing suicide. And we disconnected all of his energies from the house because I found some more there. And I talked to her again after that, and everything was fine. And that kind of kicked off my career in doing energy and entity clearings on people in their houses, which now I've been doing that for about 12 or 13 years. And I always do it remotely. I never found a need to have to go to the house to be there in person. So that gift came through. And then one of the healing modalities I did a lot of work with and training in was Psych-K, or psychology kinesiology, and that's working with subconscious core beliefs. So what this is all coming together between the past lives and the subconscious core beliefs and the clearing everything is, I'm a very eclectic healer, and I view healing taking many forms and appearances. And I think it's helpful to have many healing tools. And so when I work with a client and work with their situation, I may interpose some energy clearings. I may interpose some past life connections. I also work with parallel lives. When you make a significant decision in your life, you spin off an alternate form of you that goes into a parallel universe, very similar living circumstances, but they chose the other choice. So if you chose to get married, they chose to stay single, or they chose to marry someone else. This allows your higher self to get the life experience from all of these. Well, in the past couple of years, I'm starting to find that some of these parallel lives are in dire circumstances, and they're reaching back to our life here and influencing our life. It might be health issues, it might be financial issues, it might be emotional issues. And so one of the tools I use is I have the person be a surrogate for this parallel life. We do healing work on that parallel life, and then ask that parallel life to release their hold on the person here. So I'm working with many of these tools, and they just keep appearing, and I feel very empowered. I also feel very humbled that the universe is giving me all these gifts to use to work with people. So am I still in aerospace? I kind of severed that tie last year. My hours were going down with the company I was working for in Houston, and it was just time to get into this full time. And I'm having a great time doing it. I meet so many wonderful people.
Well, you do work all over the world, not just here in Denver. I mean, you connect with people internationally, all over the world. You're able to connect and do work and help people. So that's pretty awesome to have that reach and be able to really assist people. In this time that we're in with coronavirus and what's going on and attachments and fears, what do people need to know about fear? Because you and I have talked about fear and how when we're in fear, how that can create and affect us in our lives. So what can you share with us about what we should know about fear, especially in the environment that we're in today?
Wonderful question. There's two significant aspects to that. One is my personal interest in it. I do so much clearing work, and so many of the dark entities, what is their goal? Their goal is to instill in you the negative emotions because they charge their batteries off of that. So right now, the dark entities on the planet, the demons, large dark entities, all different forms of nuisance things that come from the dark side, they're all just lapping this up because people are in fear. They're picking up on that fear energy. It's very much like that animated show, Monsters, Inc., where they went out through doorways into kids' bedrooms and scared the kids with monsters and then charged up their energy tanks off of the kids' screams and fear. And that's very, very apt model for what's going on here is the dark side loves the fear. It's great. They're just slobbering it up. So That's one reason that we need to get out of this fear. And it's disappointing, so much in the media, really hypes this and puts the fear of it. And whether it's people dying of, bee stings from killer bees, or people dying of, sharks in the ocean, the numbers can be very, very small. You're more likely to get hit by lightning than, die of bee stings. But the way it gets hyped in the media is you think it's the next big crisis, because, that's just what media does. And boy, they've had a field day with this coronavirus and instilling fear in so many. So the first thing is we need to let go of the fear, become more objective about it, become more rational about it, in terms of, a number of people have died of this, but a number of people die of car wrecks, a number of people die of, flus, other flus, uh, people die of heart attacks, people die of drug reactions. The third leading cause of death in the U.S. is adverse response to the medical treatment or incorrect medical treatment. And that really came out in spades a couple of years ago. And now, once again, it's, back under the carpet. You know, deaths from medical treatment far exceeds the deaths we're getting from coronavirus. So it helps to have a perspective there. It just says part of life is, we're all going to die someday. And it's just a matter of when. And we don't particularly want to go out and seek it, to have it happen earlier than it's supposed to, but it's going to happen to all of us. So need to get a little bit more balanced about all that. Some of the other issues with fear is, just trying to get things back into perspective for your spiritual growth. So to me, as somebody who works on spiritual growth, helps counsel people on spiritual growth, trying to attain their highest levels and to stay on that path, Earth is a boot camp from my perspective. Earth is a place that was never designed to be, let's go live in Tahiti and everything's wonderful and it's a vacation. From my viewpoint, Earth has always been designed as a boot camp to give you spiritual challenges, to give you challenges every day that you can use your spiritual gifts to overcome, that you can use your insights, your intuition, your downloads, all these types of things to grow. The system is not designed where, wow, this sure sounds tough. I'm going to go hide in the basement, play video games, eat pizza and drink beer, and disengage with the world. And that's not the purpose here. And the universe has funny ways of making you, I'll say, pay for retreating from taking on the challenge that you signed up for when you chose this particular life. My perspective is, there is reincarnation. You have many lifetimes. Each lifetime is an opportunity to learn. Some lifetimes are an opportunity for you to maybe not learn so much yourself, but to help other people learn. For example, you might be the bad guy in somebody else's life where you're the best of friends in the spiritual plane, but you both came here with a blank slate, and you came here with a mission to maybe make their life very challenging by being a bad guy, and they grow through that, and you don't incur any karma for that. But we have all these challenges, and I believe that coronavirus itself is a major challenge to many people on the planet, to get them to wake up, to cooperate, to think more of the oneness. I mean, this has really made people everywhere, rich, poor, Chinese, African, Latin American, white, doesn't matter. Everybody's being affected by this, and everybody's being affected. Even the rich people can't necessarily go hide from it. Professional people like doctors are dying from it, so just your level of income and professionalism doesn't save you. It's really leveling the planet right now, and it's leveling it as a challenge for everyone to, what are we going to learn from this? How are we going to grow? And to run away from it in fear rather than just taking it, taking the bull by the horns and saying, what are we supposed to learn from this? What did the Creator intend with this? What did the life situation for the planet intend for this? I think this is a wonderful opportunity to grow magnificently for many people. And sadly, there's going to be a lot of people who retreat from it. And I think it's going to be, as we move forward spiritually and we have maybe other options for, is the earth going to go to a higher vibration? Is everybody going along with that earth, or are some going to be kind of left behind because they're not ready for it? Yeah, I think this is a way for the universe to help people kind of sort themselves out on who are you? You know, what is your strength? Where are you going with this? What do you see as the big picture? So I see it as a great motivating tool for that. And again, it's disappointing when some people are going to run away and hide from it rather than to take it on as a challenge and say, I can make it.
Well, you know, the truth is the planet was created with polarity, light and dark, light and dark and everything. And we were given two gifts when we came into this, free will and free choice, to make decisions, to experience different levels. And we can either step into a space of love and do what we can and be compassionate and loving, or we can step into a space of fear. And with fear, we can create negative energies. As you said, they feed off of that, but we can also create it. And in my work, I've seen people create this through elements of themselves that they want to ignore or not pay attention to that are part of us, because we all have light and dark. We all have that decision making of what we're going to do with it. It is a choice. And we choose here, right? That's the gift that we're given. And today's a choice on how people handle this, what they want to do going forward, how they look at it. And you're right, hiding from it, isolating yourself and being hidden, ignoring what our work is, what we're here to do, just makes it harder. You know, some of us haven't had real easy lives. We picked experiences that would stretch and grow us. That was the whole purpose of us coming here, right? And it's
yeah, absolutely.
And every one of us could be given the same scenario, and how we handle it's going to be different, right? We're going to have a different perspective, a different way of doing it. So I see all that fear out there that people have, and it's just being careful, because you can create really negative energies or bring them even closer in, or they can come and move in with you when you're in this fear negative space, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, it's the dark things that give us the appreciation for the bright things. Say you won a contest and you got to go to a resort for a year. How long would it take you out on the beach drinking little drinks with little umbrellas in it and occasionally going out on a sailboat or snorkeling? How many days of that could you take before you say, finally, this is hell? You know, this isn't fun anymore. This isn't enjoyable anymore. It's sameness. And these types of things really punctuate it. I mean, you know, 10 years from now, people are going to still be talking about, oh, yeah, you remember 2020, we did this. Just like when I was growing up, people are always saying, well, you remember World War II, or you remember the Korean War, or, you know, things like that. Rough times, but the people who survived it came through and said, you know, it made me a stronger person. I know that whatever I faced later in life can't ever be as bad as what we faced then, and I survived that so I can survive anything else. Again, very much like the boot camp model. Boot camps are designed to be rough and tough, because when you're in battle, you say, you know, it's really bad, bullets are whizzing over my head, but it's still not as bad as when I was in boot camp. And that's why they do it. It's an initiation rite. And for so many people in our society, we don't have an initiation rite anymore to help people see how tough or strong they are. And so we see young people doing it with video games, which I think is a poor substitute, you know, to say, well, I can get to level 23 of this game. You know, that's great. But it's tedious. What have you really proven? You haven't really been tested. You haven't really been threatened. You haven't found out how tough you are, and that you can survive even when you're confronted with something very tough. And I see some of that as probably being a motivation for gang experiences. You know, number one, it gives you a community, and number two, it shows you how tough you are. So it is an initiation rite, even though it's not helpful in the long run. But yeah, I see these tough things. You know, not necessarily just a negative thing. You know, it's disappointing that we have people dying, but the flip side is it's getting our attention, and it's making people become comply with government directives, but also to look at how can I help others? You know, who's stuck in their house? Where can I buy groceries for somebody? Where can I cut their grass? You know, those types of things.
Well, and you're seeing that everywhere. Like we're seeing people come together to help the seniors that didn't get to have a graduation. You're seeing
Yeah.
people come together for those that wanted to celebrate weddings that didn't get to do that in the traditional way that we know, to find new ways to do it. Neighbors that can't get out of their house and helping those. You know, those stories are beautiful and wonderful as we see people reach out and really try to help. I know for us, we're a family that has risk as far as lung issues. I have asthma, so I have to be really careful. And a lot of our family members suffer with breathing, so we've been really cautious with this to stay healthy and separated. So we haven't seen each other in a while except on Zoom. So to hug your grandchildren or to be around your family, it's hard to be separate, but we've chosen that we would rather do that to keep us all safe. But that's the choice that we've made to do that. So, you know, finding ways to stay connected and help and be out there to help people is really, I think, important right now. So I know one of the things that you work on, Dave, is people's belief systems and how
Yes.
our beliefs impact us. Share a little bit about how your beliefs, even in this situation, could block, bring in fears or uncertainty, and how just being able to face some of those old beliefs that we've carried through, and where do they come from? Are they just this lifetime? Are they from family? Or where do they come from? Where are some of our beliefs, and how do we become aware that that could be a belief that's holding us back?
Well, one of the models I heard when I first took the training and working with core beliefs was you have a subconscious who's like a 5-year-old, and it's managing a disk drive. And in that disk drive are rules that you've picked up from your experiences as a child, and that little 5-year-old consciousness administers that rules, hopefully in what it thinks are for your highest and best good, to protect you. Um, for example, as a child, this is a very common example. As a child, maybe you heard from some well-meaning uncle at a party, and but the well-meaning uncle, you know, just didn't really know the score. But he says, "Yeah, listen to me, kid. You don't ever want to be rich. Rich people are unhappy. They have to have lawyers. The government's after them. They don't know who their real friends are because everybody wants their money. So trust me, you don't ever want to be rich." You say, okay, I trust this person. That makes sense. And as much sense as it can make to a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old. And so you file this away in your subconscious. Now you grow up, you go to college, you say, boy, I'm really interested in marketing and sales. You get a master's in business and marketing. And then you go out and you're in basically a sales position, whatever type of sale it is. And every time you get close to closing a sale, it doesn't happen. And you say, what is it? Well, that little subconscious can still be protecting you because it knows if you make that sale, you're going to get a good commission. You're going to make money. You're going to be doing well. And you don't want to be rich because being rich is unsafe. It's unhealthy. And so, as much training as you've had, as much all this, you still have an energy around you. You still have subconscious body motions, expressions, things like that, that give off the signal to the potential buyer that they should not close the deal with you. And so I do a lot of work with people on these types of things. So for illness, I mean, if you grow up in a family where you had one or two or three relatives who were chronically in the hospital or doing poorly, maybe lingering in nursing homes, maybe hooked up to a lot of equipment, especially, if you're going to be sensitized to coronavirus, maybe relatives who had emphysema or COPD or something where they're always on breathing apparatus in a nursing home. And you have that image as a kid, and you can grow up with that, and you can have this core belief that, wow, when you have breathing images or breathing issues, you're going to be on equipment, you're going to have a very limited lifestyle, and suddenly this brings out all those fears again that this is going to happen to you or your family. And again, this is out of your subconscious, and the response may be totally out of proportion to the actual risk to your family. I mean, the risk to your family may be zero, but you have these fears, and so you go overboard with this. So I do a lot of core belief work with this. These core beliefs can also come from past lifetimes, and so you can bring some of them in as experience. We have a form of past lifetime energy that we carry around with us called an imprint. An imprint is a copy of somebody else's life history, and we carry those around with us. The positive ones are those where they might say, you're going to be born into this life, so you're coming in as Vialet, you're going to have some of these challenges in your life, and they say, how would you like to have a copy of Queen Elizabeth I? She was a great administrator, she really knew how to run the kingdom. That type of background in your subconscious would be very helpful. You can get inspiration from that. You say, yeah, that's great. But you can also carry around these imprints from lifetimes where maybe you had a sibling who was younger who died in France in the 1780s when your family was poor and living on the streets. You can also carry around some of those. And some of those experiences may give you negative feelings about some of your life situations. So another thing I work with are past lives and those types of core beliefs that can come through. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you can have these parallel lives, and some of those are showing up now as core beliefs from the difficulties they're having. Those get transferred over to you. So you can kind of get a triple whammy from these things that make your success or your response to stressful situations somewhat problematic or inappropriate. So I like to work on those. And there's so many things where you've had so many lessons in life where people presented it as absolute truth, and you were a child and you didn't have any filters, that a whole lot of things about medical stuff. For my age range, I was born in 1955. When people had a heart attack back then, the only treatment they had was you had to live a very easy, sedentary life because there's nothing else we can do for you. If you overstress your heart, you'll probably die.
Right.
There was no surgical treatment. They had a few drugs for angina pain, and that was it. And so it'd be very easy to come up in my age range saying, man, if, just subconsciously, oh boy, somebody has a heart attack, their life is over. It's kaput. They're going to be sitting on a couch watching TV and being totally disabled, which is not true these days. I mean, all the way up to getting a heart transplant or valve replacement or stents installed, all those types of things. We can handle so much of that now with our technology, but I could still have the belief that, boy, you have a heart attack, it's over for you.
Right. And those fears,
I work with those.
And yeah, those fears can come in. I could see like Aunt Mary that's really soured on relationships, sitting a child in her lap and telling the little girl, don't ever trust men. Men are terrible. You don't ever want to have a relationship. And they're just stating their experience, their input, and that child taking it and going, oh, should never trust, right? And have a relationship, and that impacts you for the rest of your life. And the likelihood that you even remember that conversation at age 21 that it happened, unless is very unlikely, and it can impact you forever and ever until you go back and really tap in and clear that. That's a really powerful way, because I don't remember everything I was told from adults in my childhood.
No.
can't even imagine what I was told as a child, that I was like, oh, I love Auntie da da da. They must know what they're saying, and taking that all in. So really easy to get stuck in those patterns.
One of the disappointing ones on that is the influence that violent TV shows have on kids. Um, they've done studies in Africa because they can look at when television was introduced there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take the kids who are between the ages of 5 and 7, where television was introduced and they started seeing people being shot and killed on TV, those were the kids who are the highest at risk when they hit 18 or 19 of being the teenage gangbangers and shooters, because um, they didn't see any of the consequences of being shot. You
Right.
know, uh, they see somebody being shot, they fall down, it's over and done with. They don't see the impact on the family of losing a loved one who was shot as a victim. They don't see hospital care for somebody who didn't die as a result of a gunshot. They don't have any of those impacts. All they see is quick solution to a problem. You don't like somebody, they're in the way of what you want, you shoot them, problem solved. And that became essentially a desensitization and training thing for these kids. And you can track them, from that critical age going on up through, being late teens, and now they become the shooters. And so this stuff, we're always absorbing this stuff. And um, the benefit that, when I work with people is these things that are undesirable, and why you have this response. You every time you go in to ask for a raise at work or to talk to your boss, you start losing your voice, you start choking up some things like that. Yeah, we can find ways to work around that, because you're just bringing up old stuff that's still in your subconscious on how you're going to react to this.
Yeah, and clearing that and really moving through it. People don't realize how everything you watch, everything you listen to, every conversation around you, whether it's in your room or the next room, your subconscious is taking all that in as experiences and information, and filtering it through a system that you may not even be consciously aware that it's using to create files, information, and how you respond and how you react to things. And it's huge when you start thinking about it, right? And really putting it out there. It's funny, I went and got my hair done right before all this started, like right early on. And my hairdresser had the news on this big TV. And so for 3.5 hours, you're watching coronavirus. And I came home like a mad woman. We have to fill the cars up with gas. We have to get food. We have to go get toilet paper. We have to do this. We have to do that. And I would have never reacted that way. But 3.5 hours of listening to that process, that fear, that energy that comes through the TV, it had a way different impact of just trying to get an update on what's happening and logically process it and move on than sitting listening to that all day. And we have to recognize that we have choices, and the stuff we're watching, listening to, the conversations that we have, everything that's coming in and around us is being stored, and goes through those filter systems of beliefs and what we think is good, bad, light, dark, harmony, disharmony. And we make decisions unconsciously all day long without really thinking about it, unless we're really present, paying attention, and thinking about it. So it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, one of the emotional things that had dredged up in me, when I was in high school, I read a book called On the Waterfront by Neville Shute, and they made a movie about it with Marlon Brando. But the basic thing in the movie is there's been all-out World War, nuclear war on the planet, and this is following a town in Australia. Australia in the southern hemisphere is the last country that's going to be hit with this fallout that is ultimately going to be fatal. And it's not a happy death. Basically, it gets in your body and it really destroys your gut before you drop dead. And so what's happening in these people's lives as they have the last weeks of their lives before they're ultimately all given a little syringe so they can inject themselves with a poison to commit suicide, so they don't have to go through the slow death. And the energy of that was coming up through me as we were looking at this coronavirus going around the planet, infecting people, with these projections of how many, potentially millions of people it could kill. And, it suddenly, the images of that movie started. I didn't see the movie, I just read the book, and the book was bad enough for me. Those images started coming up, about the end of the world scenario, and people choosing to commit suicide rather than dying a natural death because natural death was bad.
Wow. Wow. And recognizing it, right? I know where this is coming from, whereas a lot of people would just be like, yeah, you got to pay attention to what comes up for you and really address it, because, those are trigger points that we need to know about. So, well, Dave, tell us, how can somebody get a hold of you if they need some help, if they need to any kind of assistance? What, how do we get a hold of you?
The first place I'd start, because I have a lot of explanations of my services and little short video clips, is my website, www.davethemystic, just like it sounds, davethemystic.com. And I have my contact information on there. If you want to write it down, my phone number is 303-902-5323. Again, 303-902-5323. And you can either call or text there and just say you're interested in an appointment. Most of my appointments I do on the phone. One of these days we're going to be back to doing face-to-face, and I'm happy to do that if that's your desire. But I work with people all over the country, all over the world. I do it by phone, I do it by Zoom and Skype, and people are generally very happy with the experience. So my systems, they work long distance, and distance isn't an issue on healing, and so I'm happy to do it that way. So that's how you can find me. I also have my own web radio show every Monday night at 8 p.m. and that's at blogtalkradio.com/DaveTheMystic. And I've been doing that for, almost 10 years, and I have over 460 shows archived, so there's plenty of content if you're sitting at home bored. You can go find authors and healers and readers and intuitives and solo shows where I talk about my interests and my beliefs and things, and just lots of stuff there to see. And I don't think it really goes out of date for the type of material that we have. So
I agree. We'll put some of that information in the comments so that people can easily connect with you. I look forward to being back in the center and getting to see you on a regular basis. I've missed not being able to see folks and be there, just as I'm sure
absolutely
you are ready to get back to your routine when it's ready for us to do that. So, well, thank you, Dave, for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Getting on the Zoom camera. I know how everybody loves to be videotaped, right?
Oh, you're so welcome. This has been fun. I always enjoy talking to you.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking to you too. Have a wonderful week. Check out Discover Your Spiritual Gifts. We also have a radio show too that Dave and I are a host on. So we like to do those. That's on Blog Talk Radio as well. But check out our website and the information that we have. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Mr. Dave. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
All righty. Thank you.